We dialed in our tone with the two mics. We're doing the on-axis, off-axis technique, and we've got the basic tone that we're thinking we're liking. So let's maybe do a little tracking on one of the songs. And the big thing is, obviously, these are, again, basic things. Focus on playing, not writing. You should be prepared. You should have everything as close to done as possible before you get into the studio. I mean, I've had plenty of records where they write while they're in the studio, and that can be fun, and that active discovery is great, but I'd rather people have their act together. But, you leave room for improvisation. So it's always good. Again, tone comes from your hands, and I'll be showing a little bit more about that. We didn't get the string mute. But the tone comes from your hands, and we're going to dive into that. And then it's this is a statement I use a lot, and it's like it's hard to when you're in a critical listening environment, and you're really like telling people like what they're doing is like, no, that's wrong, or like pay attention to what you're doing, and it's like it's a hard thing to, people get like even me doing this, like the red light fever, when the camera's on or when you're being recorded, and to like shut off that self-conscious kind of idea. Oh, this should work.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. But you have to shut the brain off enough, and don't think about what you're playing, but be aware of what you're playing. And I don't really know how to really quantify that, but it's just think but don't think. It's just this thing of like really, and that's why I try to a lot of times get guitar players to stand up while they're playing and not sit down, because when you're sitting, you're so focused, like, okay, here it goes, I'm going to record now, don't mess up. And it's like, don't think about messing up, obviously, because you will, invariably. But you should be aware of what you're doing, so it's just more of just kind of like letting the game come to you. Just be conscious about everything, about your surroundings, but just really just focus on your playing, and focus on what you're doing, and focus on just feeling the song and feeling the music, which goes to the next thing in tracking. Number one, I can't stress this one enough. I see it so many times, time and time again. Bands come in there with me and they're tracking, and they're looking at my Pro Tools screen. They're looking at the edit window as I'm recording, and they're looking at the kick drum. It's like, I'm like, what are you looking at? And they're
anticipating it.
And they go, well, I have to know where to come in. I'm like, what do you mean you have to know where to come in? What if you're playing live? How do you know where to come in? You're listening to the music, you're feeling it. The drummer, the drummer generally counts off to start the song. Listen for that, react to that. A lot of times I will literally shut the monitor off. I'll be like, nope, don't look at that. Listen, look at the speakers, listen to the speakers, focus on the music, what's going on, feel it, react to it. And the same thing goes with even like click tracks and stuff like that. And, we've had our share a few songs in Dillinger that do it to a click, but most of Dillinger is not to a click. And it's like, you have all these parts, like the end of Farewell Mona Lisa, with those hits where it's like bang, bang, and it's just like this random just bang, bang. There's no click. It's not like we went ding, 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 ding. No, and he had to feel it, and it's like, honestly, it's the craziest thing, because half the time with those kind of things, especially, you're playing it, you wrote it with the drummer, with Billy, and he worked on it and played it live at his home, and he demoed it at home. He didn't, so it's just like, you tell the guitar player, close your eyes and feel those parts, and it's the craziest thing, because 9 times out of 10, he nails it. He just goes,
like,
feel
honestly,
it. Just
you
go.
have to kind of picture the drummer in your head.
You have to picture the drummer in your
Their
head.
personality would determine where they're going to make those random hits and things like that, and the way they play. So yeah, that's a lot of what we do.
And again, it's like go to it. Because your eyes will deceive your ears. You look at the screen, and even just that, like looking at it, and you'll be late, you'll be early. You're just going to deceive it. You know, your eyes will deceive your ears. So it's like that's why I always loved tape, because there's no screen. You weren't looking at it. So like feel it, how you're locking in. Really perceive how you're locking in. Like just feeling the drums, and like what are you focusing on. And you can go through this because I know you actually did this in a workshop earlier and talking about like what the focus is and what the locking in with the drummer. Because like the Dillinger stuff is very drum guitar centric. That's how their stuff was always written. It was always generally written with Ben and the drummer, whoever the drummer is, whether the original drummer Chris or Gil or Billy.
I always wrote thinking of like frequencies, like we talk about a lot. So like a low E would be something that would follow more of a kick, and then a higher chord would be something that would be following more of the snare.
Or the China,
or the China, or whatever. But I think that I think that it's really like, for instance, when we you talk about this a lot. You're talking about this now. Hopefully we'll get a chance to show it. But I noticed that I record myself as well at home, so I am very guilty of looking at the screen because I'm actually editing and punching myself in at home. So I tend to naturally do that. But I think what was great about doing that tape stuff was that we really did have to feel it and kind of have that. You never heard of. You don't rarely hear older records described as sterile.
No.
They might be good. They might be bad. But that kind of description of a record is a newer thing.
Yeah, that.
You know what I mean? So why is that? Why is that? Because people weren't looking at screens. They weren't editing to transients. They weren't cutting and pasting parts. They weren't trying to make things sterile. They weren't the ability for it to be sterile. There wasn't the ability for it to be sterile. It was either good or bad. And that it's interesting. I just thought of that while you were talking. I never heard that description about older records before there was a computer screen. So
even the click track thing too, like I know this goes towards more drum tracking and everything and basic philosophy of recording, but like click tracks, like I said, like we've done stuff where there's a click, on some of the more like straight ahead rock songs. We have done parts and sections to a click, but how often would I ever really run the click in the control while we're tracking? Never. No. Never, because it's like, and I have done other records where it's like pretty much all clicked out, and they'll be like, "Can you put the click up?" And I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
Because I don't edit the drums. The drums aren't edited to a grid. They're not to the click. The click is a guide. It's a roadmap. You follow it and you kind of flow with it. And I do a lot of things where I edit the click to. I'll do a tempo map, what's called, and I will edit the click to how the song flows without any tempo guide. If this part pushes, if this part pulls, I will ramp and move the click. I'll move the click around to the player as opposed to making the player move to the click.
Yeah, and when a drummer, and we're saying drummer because the guitar player typically plays to the drummer, so the performance of the guitar player is really dependent on how they react to the drums. But when you are playing to a set click, people need to realize, the drummers particularly, that being good at playing to a click does not mean being able to land on a click. It means being able to play around a click. So that means when you're playing to the drum track that was played to a click, as a guitar player, you need to be following the drums and the performance and the tug and pull, not the click. So that's a good point about not having the click on when you track. But
the push and pull. I've literally heard instances of people, the bands that I've worked with and have worked with other producers where, this technique might work great for them. It's just not my philosophy. I'm not degrading what they do with that, but I've literally heard instances where they shut everything off and it's like, okay, let's get this part, and they'll shut the drums off and just put the click up and shut all the other instruments off and put the click up and just have the guitar player play the part to the click.
And more times than not, now when I'm watching these kind of behind-the-scenes webisodes of bands making their records,
and you see them,
that's what I'm seeing.
Click is
I'm seeing
just
someone
loud.
riffing to a click, And I'm like, it blows my mind, because then why have a person in there at all? You can cut and paste every note on a fretboard and every drum on a drum map, and it's like, so.
The life and the push and the pull and the
Yeah.
mistakes and all the weird noises and all that stuff. All that
That's
stuff
part of making
is,
a record.
That's part of the vibe and the part of what that person or the soul and the essence of the track is. So, I try to capture all of that.
Yeah,
Let's
and not
leave
to
it.
get too much into the drum stuff, but again, on our last record, just through working with Steve and having all this time, trying to figure out the best way to maybe create tempo maps and things like that, so then I can go back in and do more complex sound design and MIDI, which I do a lot of. I actually tempo mapped all our demos. So for songs that we were going to be incorporating more electronics, which is very common now, we played in a room like it was just a punk band, just having, like, going off, like sweating our ass off with our shirts off, freaking out in my basement. And then I took those demos and I sat and tempo mapped all the parts and created a click. And then in the studio, our drummer was able to, without the stress of knowing this is for real or that it's being recorded or not being in the same environment, he was able to then track to that energy and that vibe that we had in the basement. And then consequently, I was able to then go do MIDI and more complex programming to that grid. That was a natural impulse of how we felt when we were just jamming. So there are ways to do things and utilize this technology and use it to your advantage, but it doesn't mean necessarily abandon the human nature of making records. So hopefully we'll get a little more into that.
Ben's doing all these
moving
electronic stuff, and we have to lock in. It has to be something to do. Usually a MIDI program, you're needing some sort of tempo grid or something. So we have to create this weird, crazy thing that goes just like, it's just all over the place. And what was that? Wow, man, I wish I could remember right now off the top of my head. There's a website about click tracks. Find the click track or something like that. I wish I knew what it was.
There's this website.
I don't know if anybody can look
or,
that, or it's like find the click. I think it's called Find the Click Track.
And you can type in
like
almost any song that was ever written.
And it analyzes the
tempo.
And so many great records. It's like you could tell what was done to a click or what's not, because you do one of those click and it's like to a click, and it's like this. It draws a map, and then you draw like Led Zeppelin, Whole Lotta Love, and it's like.
Yeah, or like some old Metallica song. It's like, and Mars is just all over the place,
Right. And that kind of thing is the mental state of tracking. Like that's what we were talking about. Like that type of stuff and all those kind of variants and all that kind of those mistakes, those happy accidents, that just the push and pull. That's so important to maintaining that vibe. Yeah.
Kind of a question for both of you from a philosophy perspective, and for Dillinger, since the guitar and drums are so intertwined with each other. Do you guys generally record each individual part in isolation, or do you try to get the band together and record the guitar and drums at the same time?
Good question. Kind of both.
We've done both.
Yeah.
We've done both. The early stuff, it was always, the genesis of it was never a full band, because Ben generally always, and we'll get into this concept a little bit later, but Ben basically always tracked all the guitars on the Dillinger records. The second guitar player, through the years, they track some parts, but for the most part, it's because it's always been Ben's vision, and it's like the genesis of it was always Ben writing with the drummer. So, like on like the Miss Machine record, but all the basic tracks were always done with you and Chris in the room, like together in the studio.
Yeah, but then typically I would delete it and then go back and try and get better tones and figure things out, because the point of me being in that room wasn't necessarily for it to sound good. Sometimes I wouldn't even play the right chords or anything. I was just trying to coax our drummer into having that feeling and making sure. And also sometimes it'd be like, wait a minute, there's supposed to be one more of those, isn't there? Like one more time. Oh, really? Yeah, because I felt like... So there's some people in these rock bands or stuff like that feel that there's a vibe and some of that bleed you were talking about, on like that Van Halen
that's
tracks.
A big thing. And I've done plenty of records, where we track everybody.
Certainly.
The basic tracks are live, and we go for keeper tones. I've done a couple of records like that, where more than a couple, where we're going for let's really, we're dialing in not just
Yeah.
like, you know, normally like basic setup. Okay, we got to get drum tones or whatever, but you know, as long as we have enough mics and inputs and everything like that, okay, let's go for keeper guitar tones. Let's go for everything, and let's capture the entire band playing live. The guitars either in the same room or cabinets isolated. So to minimize bleed, sometimes you want the bleed. Sometimes
Yeah.
we do it all together.
It depends on time frame and all those things.
It depends on budget,
But
time. It
I
depends
think
on a lot of it.
specifically to Dillinger, you know, our combination, we are a technical kind of band, predominantly, I guess, and to some degree. So our combination of precision and live energy and punk attitude, I think, is best achieved by combining some of these philosophies and, you know, coming back into the control room like we're doing now and having a little more control over those things, but also making sure we don't ignore that energy and that feeling when we're starting out and laying down that groundwork and that bed.
Absolutely. I'm just trying to, you know, if you can just for just another second here, I need to actually pull up a click, which there's no click here, but I'm going to actually
There are
need to pull up.
spots on
Well, I
this.
know I'm going to need to pull up a click to start the song. I eliminated whatever was there because this was pulled from the actual mix section. You were gonna?
Yeah,
ask
I was curious, like on the tempo mapping. So say, like you, Ben, you were in the basement, you played through the songs. How many song sections were you doing? And I'm curious, like, I mean, did it change every bar, or what? I mean, how dynamic was that? How much time?
Yeah, that's
What's
a
reasonable?
really good question. Sometimes it's about kind of finding that medium. Okay, so I'm sitting here and I'm figuring out our drummer Billy is in the 160 to 165 range. Let me make it 163 and make that like 10 seconds stay static at 163. Sometimes I literally tempo map the entire thing. I use Steinberg Cubase as my DAW, and that has a great feature called tempo detection, which has changed the game for me a lot, especially for things like that. So, you know, sometimes it's not perfectly accurate to do an entire song that's going 350 BPM and changing as much as the Dillinger song goes on, but you can fairly accurately get sections and pieces and use that tool to detect it. So sometimes, honestly, it's changing by the millisecond. You know, it's constantly changing. Like I literally tempo map the entire song and let it change as much as it has to.
And then just fix where
And
the
fix
sections
spots and be like, you know, this would be a little more beneficial to be a little more stable for at least this amount of time. So it really is a combination. But yeah, sometimes it'll be section by section, and sometimes it'll be second by second. You know, I can't say how many times we've played with bands that when their computer broke, they couldn't play. They walk off stage, you know, or something like that. So I think that going into a recording with that mindset enables you to then present your band in a way that is as natural as possible and serves the emotion of what you're trying to do, even later when you're performing these songs on stage, because you're still kind of serving that energy from the beginning, but also taking advantage of these awesome tools that we have now. So
It sounds like always, like the most natural thing that you can do is the best. So like,
yeah,
tempo
again,
map
I
to
feel
the way
like
you play it, and
Right.
then that's the tempo. It's not set the BPM for the song.
No,
track
it's-
that.
I mean, and I've had records where, you know, we've done clicks and like 1 BPM does work for a song. But
Yeah.
again, I don't do things to a grid, ever. But it's like I literally like will take I'll listen to the band, and I will not in Pro Tools. I have like a little Tama rhythm watch, like a little separate metronome, and it's got a tap tempo feature. And I will sit there and listen to the band, and I'll listen to the section, and I'll be like, play that section, and I'll tap out a tempo for that section. It's like, okay, well, that section's here, and then the next section, oh, the chorus actually slows down. You know, okay, bring down the chorus, you know, like, and then as the drummer plays over a fill, like, you know,
Ramp it up.
I ramp it up over the fill, because generally drummers tend to speed up over drum fills, and that's fine, but I don't want to force him to pull back and have a holdback when he's tracking, and it's the same with guitar. I want to adapt to what they're doing.
Yeah, I feel like
not
some of these
make people adapt to what I'm
technologies
doing.
Are you know, were made in order to enhance what we already know, and then and some of them were made because they have to stay marketable for all the lazy people. So I think certain being able to like perfectly fixing grid, bad takes, some of that stuff's really convenient. Like I do like a commercial spot or something that's just for a paycheck, and it's really easy to just be able to sit down and play drums really crappy and fix it just because it, emotion and stuff like that is not as important, and art is not as much. But for the most part, yeah, like try to use this stuff to enhance the goal.
Mm-hmm. And looking on to the back to the slide, and just determining how you're locking in, and what's the focus, and like we'll show you on the thing we're about to track. Like, what's your focus? What are you listening to? What are you actually locking into? Because it's important, and it can change, from song to song, and definitely within parts in the song.
Right. Well, that's like what you were asking me about the thing I did on
when you were talking about locking into.
A good example of that is I recently did like one of these kind of classes, and it was mainly on performance. And so I had our drummer Billy play this really technical, fast piece of a song that was very syncopated and complex, a lot of time signatures, and very fast at the same time. But I had him play it with absolutely no dynamics. Everything was at full power. And it was very impressive, and the audience clapped. They were like, oh my God, it's like a drum machine. This guy's like, And then I said, okay, now play it right. And he played it with all these dynamics and ghost notes and all these things, and we recorded it. And when you looked at the transient, the wave, the snare track, the first one was just flat. It was just like everything was loud. And then when we recorded the second take where he was doing all these dynamics and doing, accents, things were going up and down. You could see where the accents were. You could see where the focus was, where things turned around, where the one started again, and all these things. And then I said, okay, well, the bass is kind of following these things. I follow with my higher chords. I'm following that, and then my low E is following more of these notes and this and that. And then and that's how we're creating. This is actually. There's pulse there, there's rhythms, there's syncopation, there's polyrhythms, there's all these things that are actually working on this human thing. And this you can program. This is very difficult to program, this one.
Right.
Take one, that can be a drum machine. This cannot. You cannot program this. And people were really pretty blown away by the difference when you actually not only heard it, but actually looked at it on the screen, and saw the difference.
Yeah, and I know we're really saying, like, and it's I go back to, like, think but don't think, don't think but be aware. And we're really deconstructing this, to its simplest element, because he doesn't come in here thinking that he's going to lock in with a kick drum. He just does. That's his process. That's what he feels as an artist. That's how he creates. That's just what he automatically does. And I'm like, sometimes he does things and I'm like, where are you coming from? Where did you think of this? It's just. But that's his thought process. So and for somebody else in another band, I'm gonna focus in and saying, okay, what are you listening to? What's your focus? I'm just trying, and I don't necessarily ask him what his focus is, but I'll pay attention to what he's doing and what his focus is, and I'll kind of try and hone in and determine what, when I say from a guitar player, if you're tracking yourself and you're saying how are you locking in, then I guess you have to give it a little more thought, or not. But but when I'm tracking somebody else, and I will kind of automatically I feel like I'm just listening, just in the same way, I'll listen to a sound and I'll say, I'll focus on just the high end, or I'll focus on just the low end, and I'm dialing in the high end. It's the same thing. I'm looking at what he's focusing at, and then I'll make sure that, make him aware to make sure that he maintains that focus. Because if he's doing that, it's like, okay, well, you're following the kit. You know what I mean? But
mental illness has been my best friend. I mean, if we could just fix everyone's deficits, there'd be no Nirvana, there'd be no there'd be no Zappa, and there'd be no Dylan if you could auto-tune every vocal. So
100%, right. But yeah, it's like really just focusing, like being aware of what their focus is, and trying to be like tune in and hone in
to
and be sympathetic to what they're doing, and try to get them, make sure that when I'm coaxing a performance out of a player, try and get them to like accomplish that.
Right.
So you're obviously paying a lot of attention to getting the tempo mapping correct and doing all the custom work into that. What do you need to be aware of when you're going cross-platform? Obviously, going from Cubase to Pro Tools and
Well,
back and forth. What are some things that you found to be helpful?
That's a whole other issue because unfortunately, to my dismay,
Can't we all
pretty
just
much,
get along?
can't we all just get along? And the question is, the answer is no, we can't, because seems like tempo maps from Pro Tools do not translate to Cubase, and vice versa, and Logic to Pro Tools and Logic to Cubase. They don't. None of them have. The only two that work together are Cubase and Nuendo because they use the same engine.
Yeah.
The other ones, they don't work.
Logic and Pro Tools don't?
Nope.
Have you been like exporting them as MIDI notes or then just setting a
not
tempo
even
track
that,
together?
Export as an audio click.
Yeah.
I will actually have to, if I do it, I'll have to have them print an audio click. And then I can do the same thing. I can do a tempo detect from their audio click. But I can't
Right.
just grab his session and
Yeah,
because
can't
when you do it,
necessarily.
even when you do it as the MIDI tempo map, for some reason, it doesn't work.
It's
They're
not for-
always
yeah,
off.
It has to be.
It's and if somebody out there in the internet land knows of a way, and everybody I've talked to, they're all like, yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah, let us know.
Let us know, because I would
we
love to know.
Print the click, and then I'll turn that into MIDI in my environment, and vice versa. And then it's our own combination of the.
Yeah, and the cross-platform thing, which is interesting, not just for the tempo thing, but obviously there's no direct translation software. So like we'll get into the reamping thing and the DI thing, and we touched on that yesterday. And there were plenty of instances on the last couple of records where I was tracking vocals with Greg downstairs in my main control room, and he was upstairs with his Cubase setup up in the little closet and just like huddled away like like Rumpelstiltskin, in there just like tracking his guitar, like for like a little extra guitar parts, like, oh, I got this little extra like clean lead or this little extra little part or whatever, and he'd be up there like doing some extra stuff. So I would have to make audio stems.
Yeah, we do a lot of things. We use stems.
We'll
a
use
lot.
stems.
That's
I'll
also
just make a
another
drum stem and
idea
like
of
a
committing.
bass stem and then commit and then give it to him, and then he just tracks to that and then gives me the files bounce back.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how
Stems
that works.
and Dropbox and Flash sticks are amazing. Mm-hmm. They really.
Yeah, this day and age, it's just wonderful. I mean, he could be in the other side of, he was giving me guitar parts back from like the last record.
The last record,
he was
the
giving
very
me
last
stuff
week
back
or
from New
two.
Jersey. He
We
flew
did
back to
from-
New Jersey, and I was just back there. He flew back because he had to get back early, and Liam and Greg stayed. Well, Greg lives in LA, but and so we were finishing up bass and then vocals, and he was like, all of a sudden I get an email. It's like, oh, there's more guitar parts on my Dropbox. Okay, and I grab them. I'm like, what do we do now? It's wonderful. The collaboration that's available now with FiOS and high-speed internet and and Dropbox and all that is amazing. So does that answer your question? Okay, good.
The
Okay,
answer,
so
yeah. Unfortunately, we couldn't answer it.
yeah,
To answer your question, we can't answer it.
yeah,
We're still trying to figure it out.
We're still trying to figure that one
Yeah.
out.